Hola a todos! Your reading and listening papers for Spanish are on Tuesday mornings. So here are my 12 top tips for both AQA and EdXL. So firstly, there are going to be lots of distractors in both papers, so words that distract you from the correct answer. You need to obviously separate the distractor from the real answer to get the question correct. If something looks too good to be true, it's probably incorrect. So if you see the exact same word in both the text and the questions, when they could have used a synonym, that generally is not the correct answer. My favorite example of this is in the AQA 2020 reading paper, where in a multiple choice question they use the word dura, and so does the text. However, in the text it's talking about the time period, as dura means it lasts from the verb durar, but in the answers dura is used to mean it's difficult. This is such a common trick, so if you see the exact same specific word in the text and the multiple choice question answer, do not jump to that one, it's unlikely to be correct. AQA and EdXL will always use lots of synonyms. Okay, secondly, I want to highlight the importance of reading the example. If they give you an example, it's there for a reason, so please look at that. It will usually tell you how many words or in how much detail you have to answer, especially for AQA reading questions where it says, according to the circled answer. If you do AQA, you know what I mean. Another sort of type of distraction can be where they mention the correct item, but they put a negative word in front of it. And this goes on to my third top tip, which is learn the negative words. I've got a table of them here with their uses and sort of their translations. Pause to read it and make sure you understand all of these, so if you see them on Tuesday, you know what they mean. Any questions, drop a comment. Okay, moving on to another type of question, which are almost dictation questions, where you don't need to spot the correct answer, but rather write down what they say. This is testing a slightly different skill, and will usually include hard vocabulary that you need to know. If you want to see what I mean, have a look at the 2023 question 22 from AQA. My fifth tip is if a sort of question mentions the best or the most or the main, the text is going to have lots of options, but we need to focus on which one the main one is. So for example, in 2020, AQA asked, what is like the main reason for growth in online shopping? And the text mentioned a couple of reasons, which all led to growth, but only one was the main reason. The text said, pero la razón principal es que ahorra tiempo, meaning it saves time, which was the correct answer. So that's the final type of trick AQA uses, but they do normally put the word in bold to catch your attention. These are the sorts of words we're expecting to see in those sorts of questions. So, la razón principal is the main reason, la principal ventaja is the advantage, the main advantage, la mayor razón is the biggest reason, la razón fundamental is the fundamental reason, lo fundamental is the fundamental thing. When we've got lo plus the adjective, it's saying like, for example, lo bueno, the good thing. Lo más importante, the most important thing, and sobre todo, above all. Okay, next you need to be able to spot and make use of cognates, which are words that look similar in both Spanish and English. These are super common, so if you think a Spanish word looks like an English one, you can probably have a guess. For example, generoso is the word generous. Something else that will help you is recognizing that there are words that come from the shared root. For example, pan means bread, panadero is the job, the baker, and panaderia is like the place or the building, the bakery. These words are all heavily linked, so hopefully if you know one, you're able to work out the others in the exam. So don't stress if you see a new word, there is a high chance you'll be able to work out the meaning of it. A diminutive is a suffix which almost makes the word cuter. For example, poco becomes poquito, perro, the word for dog, can become perrito, which is a puppy. Just be aware of this, so if you see a word ending in ito or ita, you don't get thrown off. But on the flip side, you don't need to know every single word to do well. You just need to be able to know enough to be able to work out the correct answer. If you're not on top of your vocabulary, there's not much time left to learn the entire vocab list, so focus on the high frequency words. And on top of this, do as many past papers as possible in the time that you have left. I put a list on screen here of 60 common words which some of you won't know. They're purposely not the super easy ones, as they're not cognates, but they're very common in the higher tier papers, and the vast majority are applicable for foundation as well. On Anki and Quizlet, I've got all of the words for each exam board that you can be asked on. And 99% of the time, exam boards will only use the words in the papers from the vocab list. I've got some videos going through words on Anki if you can't be bothered to download it yourself. They're in my GCSE Spanish Anki playlist. Drop a comment with one new word and its meaning, and you guys can learn new words from each other. Okay, another common word I've just thought of is formación, which means training. I'm going to mention it because I've just thought of it. Okay, moving on to tip number 9, which is down here. In the 5 minutes of reading time that you get in the listening paper, you should flip through the paper and have a look at the questions. You can start translating the vocabulary, but that isn't super necessary because you do get like 20 seconds in between each question anyway. And then number 10, if you're aiming for a grade 8 or like a grade 9, it's the irregular verbs that you're going to need to know. Words like quiso, which means he wanted, which has come up in a translation before. But also if it came up in like a normal reading or listening question, you probably would know what it means. I've got a separate video here going through 16 irregular verbs and their conjugations in various tenses, so go watch that afterwards. Okay, moving on to tip 11, the translation question. Translation question is 9 marks for AQA and 7 for EdXL. Obviously, the exam board are going to use tricky vocabulary to catch you out. A good example is hace plus duration, which means something ago. For example, hace 6 años is 6 years ago. I'm going to attempt this translation question here super quickly. So, para ser sincero, to be honest or sincere, I'm going to translate that as honest. No me gusta, I don't like to watch TV. After me gusta, we've got the infinitive there. It seems to me, me parece, it seems to me a waste of time. Perdida from the verb perder, a loss or to lose. So, a waste or loss of time. I prefer to play in the garden or read a good book. Sometimes I like to watch, telediario is the word for news, just like we've got noticias. This also means like the news. Because, ya que, it interests me. Lo que here is what. If you see lo que, it normally just means what. So what happens in the world. Normally, lo means it, but lo plus que is saying what. So it interests me what happens in the world. Yesterday, I watched a documentary, a history documentary, and it was fascinating. I learned a lot in the present tense. Lo que, again, what I cannot stand, soportar is like I cannot stand, I cannot bear this, is watching soap operas. Even though ver is the infinitive, we can say watching, because in English I think we more commonly say that. So what I cannot stand is watching soap operas. I think that they are stupid. I've also got this video here where I go through some past AQA reading translation questions. My last tip is to double check what language you need to answer in. If you do it in the wrong language, you will lose all the marks. There's different instructions for EdXL and AQA. For example, in EdXL, you never need to answer in Spanish, but then for AQA, towards the end of the papers, the questions will be in Spanish and you need to answer in Spanish. But in the exam, just double check. In the 5 minutes of prep time that you get, I would get a highlighter and highlight all over section B, reminding yourself in the future that you need to answer in Spanish, and this is for AQA. Okay, and that concludes my 12 top tips. Last year, I put out a Google form after the exam asking everyone how it went. I'm going to put up some responses I got on the screen, but just a warning that the papers last year from AQA were particularly tricky. I do hope the papers will be slightly easier this year, but either way, we do need to be prepared for some nasty tricks from AQA and EdXL. I will have another form out this year, and I'll share some responses on my Instagram stories after the exam. On Monday at 8 PM, I'm running a group session, and you can buy a ticket to that on astarspanish.com/revision. I'm doing one for writing as well. There's 2 sessions actually, a separate one for AQA and a separate one for EdXL. Vale, absolute best of luck, and I'll see you here next week when you're revising for your writing paper. Adios!